Hi everyone, it's John. I know it's been a long while, over 3 weeks since I made my last video, but I have to say that the holidays kind of got away with me and I enjoyed my time just reading, and I have to say not writing any book reviews and not doing much of anything productive. So I didn't get a chance to post any videos, but I managed to get several more books, and I wanted to show those to you. Actually, the last video I did was one half of a very, very, very large purchase that I made, somewhere around 35 or 40 books. And I think I showed around 16 or 18 last time. There's no way you can possibly do justice to all of them in one video, so I just decided to break it up into two. And only now am I getting around to part 2. So, Peg actually just posted a video last night where Peg over at the History Shelf, of course, said that videos called part 2 don't get any views. So, but then again, what else is new? I wanted to show the other half. Part 1 continued. More of part 1. Well, we'll call it that instead. These are from 2 different presses. Last time I showed you everything from Liberty Fund. I want to start with 4 books that are from a press that Peg has also mentioned a few times, and it's Clooney Media. Clooney Media is a publishing company that is exclusively for Catholic material, whether that is Catholic intellectual history, Catholic theology, Catholic devotional literature, etc. And granted, as a non-believer, the devotional literature and other stuff like that is of limited interest to me. However, there are things there that are of a lot of interest to me. And I found 4 that I wanted to share with you. I bought these a couple of months ago, and you got a 40% discount on your first purchase from the site. So, like last time, what I'll do is I'll show you the book and read the little blurb on the website about the book. And I'll do the same thing with Liberty Fund too when I get to those. But first, 4 from Clooney Media. This first book is called The State in Catholic Thought, a Treatise in Political Philosophy by Heinrich A. Raumann. With an introduction by Bruce Fronin. Quite a treatise. So the blurb on the site says, poverty, the environment, the family, education, freedom of religion. What is the role of the state in promoting human flourishing in the light of unprecedented changes to the very fabric of society? The State in Catholic Thought is a masterful survey of the development of the Church's teaching on the relationships between the nation-state and individuals, families, and local and international communities. Professor Bruce Fronin's introduction sets Raumann and his work in political and intellectual context, encapsulating Raumann's analysis and the importance of his magnum opus and assisting readers to find the meanings of renewing a more just political and social order. Raumann actually has a book that is also published by Liberty Fund. I think it's a book called it's a book on law, natural law or something like that. I have it. I think I showed it last time. But here's the first book. Next are 2 books from a historian, a Dutch historian. Let's see, which one should I show first? I think I'll do this one first. This is the book everyone knows him for if you recognize his name at all. His name is Johann Huizinga, and this is The Waning of the Middle Ages. His, well, I don't know how much people read it anymore. It used to be sort of canonical reading about the late Middle Ages, but I never see people talk about it on YouTube. This book says, the blurb, says, Huizinga paints a portrait of the conventions and customs of life in the 14th and 15th centuries as they reflect an autumnal waning of the Middle Ages. Considering theology and mysticism, politics and statesmanship, poetry and painting, marriage and love, Huizinga presents this period in France and the Netherlands as a death of an age, born of intellectual and cultural exhaustion, rather than the dawn of the Renaissance. In this light, the end of the Middle Ages becomes apparent as the logical conclusion of the old, rather than the genesis of the new. And they actually have, at Clooney Media, two, and I will try to remember to put the websites for both Clooney and Liberty Fund down at the bottom of the drop-down box, so you can easily find the links if you're interested in any of these or just browsing their catalogs. This is another one that they have. This is a series of essays, also by Huizinga, called The Course of Civilizations. The Course of Civilizations is described as a collection of essays by cultural historian Johann Huizinga on the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and the concepts of history and culture. In this, and excuse the sort of flowery, superlative language that I'm using, I'm just reading the ad blurb material, and you know how that can sometimes sound. In his exceptionally creative approach to history, called cultural history, Huizinga gave primacy of place to social relations from which a culture derives its formative ideas and thus its unique character. The essays in this volume cover a fascinating range of topics, including the task of the historian, the role of ideals in cultural evolution, nationalism and patriotism, realism and the Renaissance, and a series of biographical portraits. Delivered in Huizinga's classic, approachable voice, they present a compelling critical treatise on how historical periods realize their shape and meaning within the broader context of the course of civilizations. And the last book, the one that I really wanted to get, and that they still had in stock. Occasionally, Clooney doesn't have things in stock, I've noticed, but check back a couple of weeks later, sometimes they pop up. This is a book by one of my favorite philosophers he's not a medieval philosopher. He was himself a philosopher who wrote about medieval theology and medieval philosophy, and his name is Etienne Gilson, or Etienne Gilson, if you insist on anglicizing his name, and it's the Christian philosophy of St. Augustine. Gilson was an Augustine scholar, wrote several books on him, and like I said, several dozen books on just the broader subject of medieval philosophy and theology. And the blurb here says, Augustine of Hippo recognizes that philosophia, the love of wisdom, begins with faith and then moves gradually by grace into an understanding of that faith. Following Augustine's profound understanding and expositions of the Trinity and the Incarnation, creation and original sin, nature and grace, freedom and desire, and the human person as the imago Dei, Gilson shows the rich philosophical themes which recur throughout the Augustinian oeuvre. An ideal companion volume to Gilson's renowned The Spirit of Medieval Philosophy, the Christian philosophy of St. Augustine is a comprehensive map to that vast and intricate world of Augustinian thought which has enriched the history of philosophical and theological endeavor. So, those are 4 books from Clooney Media, which, if you have an interest in anything theological or philosophical that is sort of maybe tangential to theology or religious thought, it might be. These are sort of nice, really pretty. I don't think they do hardbacks. I could be wrong about that, but nice, sturdy paperbacks printed on really beautiful, thick paper. Like I said, I'll try to leave the URL in the drop-down box. But now on to the rest of the books that I got from Liberty Fund back in, oh goodness, November or something. And I think there are 14, so 14, 15, 16, something like that. The first one is nice and small. This is the creation. Okay, these, like I mentioned last time, are all wrapped in cellophane, and I'm not going to unwrap them until I read them. So I enjoy having them in nice, new, pristine condition. So I apologize for any glare you might see. The Creation of the Presidency, and that is the American presidency, by the way, 1775 to 1789, a study in constitutional history by Charles C. Thatch, Jr. Fresh from a battle against monarchy, the American founders were wary of a strong executive, but they were equally conscious that unchecked legislative power risked all the excesses of democracy. Creating an effective executive did not dominate the legislative body posed... Okay, let me start that sentence one more time. Creating an effective executive who did not dominate the legislative body posed a significant challenge. In The Creation of the Presidency, 1775 to 1789, Charles Thatch's lucid analysis reveals how these conflicting patterns shaped the writing of the Constitution and the early clarification of executive powers. Quite a thin book, but I think many of the books, not only written by Clooney, printed by Clooney Media and printed by Liberty Fund, are not new books in the strict sense. They are newly, again, in print, but I think Thatch was writing in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So this is sort of... usually what they do over at Liberty Fund is they take a book that has been formerly quite influential and sort of fits their ideological mold, which is, I would say, slightly conservative / libertarian, nothing crazy. I've read about half a dozen books from Liberty Fund now, and they are not off the deep end by any stretch of the imagination, which is obviously why I bought 40 books by them a couple of months ago. But these were not published, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So some of them are actually centuries old, as you will see next. This actually came in 2 volumes, published in cellophane as together, but they're 2 separate books. I've never seen an edition of this book that would merit it being this long. So I'm guessing that a lot of the material in here might be critical apparatus, notes, additional reading, hopefully, if I'm lucky, a really chunky introduction that gives a lot of context and stuff. But this is by... Oh goodness, there's that glare. Bernard Mandeville, and this is The Fable of the Bees. On private vices and public benefit. Ooh, okay, can't see it. Okay. And speaking of old books, this book is 300 years old. So, it used to be that everyone read the notorious Bernard Mandeville, 1670 to 1733. He was a great satirist and came to have a profound impact on economics, ethics, and social philosophy. The Fable of the Bees begins with a poem and continues with a number of essays and dialogues. It's all tied together by the startling and original idea that private vices, that is self-interest, can lead to public benefits, like the development and cooperation and operation of society. So you can see how Liberty Fund might want to republish a book, basically praising the rudimentary idea behind capitalism and free markets. This is one of their, they don't explicitly call it this, but one of the more historical pieces that sort of feeds into economic theory. But before you go over there, and they have a lot of 20th century economists, tons and tons of 20th century economy and political economy, if you're interested in that sort of thing. The next book is maybe the nerdiest thing in all of these books that I've shown so far, and I know it's a competition. This is Early Economic Thought in Spain, 1177 to 1740, by Marjorie Grice Hutchinson. In the 16th and early 17th centuries, clerics gave lectures at the University of Salamanca on such topics as the varying purchase power of money, the morality of money, and how price is determined. While she was teaching at the London School of Economics, Marjorie Grice Hutchinson was urged to investigate early records of these lectures. Her study of the manuscript notes of these then obscure lectures led to her interest in the development of economic ideas in early Spain and their subsequent influence on the rest of Western Europe. So, medieval, Renaissance, and early modern economic Spanish thought. I'll do it. Next. I recently posted a review, I guess maybe 2 or 3 months ago, of my first reading experience of the English political philosopher Michael Oakshott. And just had to get this too after having read it. Thought it was really quite thoughtful. This is Hobbes on Civil Association by Michael Oakshott. That is, of course, Thomas Hobbes. Of Michael Oakshott and his interest in Thomas Hobbes, Professor Paul Franco has written, quote, "The themes Oakshott stresses in his interpretation of Hobbes are skepticism about the role of reason in politics," which, by the way, if you don't know Oakshott's body of work, he is perhaps best known for a long essay, 40, 50 pages or so, about a topic that is about basically that. How when we use reason as a guide in political decision making, that we are ultimately failed by it. So, let me start the quote over again. Got sidetracked. The themes Oakshott stresses in his interpretation of Hobbes are the skepticism about the role of reason in politics, allegiance to the morality of individuality as opposed to any sort of collectivism, and the principle of non-instrumental, non-purposive modes of political association, namely civil association. End quote. Of Hobbes's Leviathan, Oakshott has written, "Leviathan is the greatest, perhaps the sole masterpiece of political philosophy written in the English language. Hobbes on Civil Association consists of Oakshott's 4 principal essays on Hobbes and the nature of civil association as civil association pertains to ordered liberty. The essays are called Introduction to Leviathan from 1946, The Moral Life in the Writings of Thomas Hobbes from 1960, Dr. Leo Strauss on Hobbes from 1937, and The Leviathan, a Myth from 1947. The forward remarks place these essays within Oakshott's entire corpus. So 4 essays by Oakshott, all on civil association. This is a book by a writer I was completely unfamiliar with until I started browsing around the Liberty Fund catalog. And by the way, if you're interested in these Liberty Fund books, I really do recommend the catalog. They'll send you one gratis, and it will give you several hours of browsing pleasure. This is a 20th century, I guess we could really call him a political economist, and this doesn't have an interesting cover to show you or anything. Everything is on the spine matter, but his name is Bertrand de Juvenal. He was a French writer, and this is Sovereignty. Who decides? Who is the sovereign? What is a good act? In quest of answers to these vitally important questions, Bertrand de Juvenal examines successively the nature of history and authority, the political good, the sovereign, and liberty. His concern is with, quote, the prospects of individual liberty in democratic societies in which sovereignty purportedly resides in the whole people of the body politic. His objective is a definition and understanding of the canons of conduct for the public authority of a dynamic society. Liberty Fund, as is the case with many authors that it publishes, has several books by Juvenal. This one looked the most approachable for someone who is not steeped in economics or political economy, like me. I'm not steeped. I wasn't saying I was. I was certainly not steeped in either one of those subjects, but looked maybe the easiest entree into the subject. I don't know why I'm showing you a blank cover. It's all right there. Next up is another. Let's see. Yeah, it's not Lord Acton, but it is by someone named H.B. Acton, and this is The Illusion of the Epoch: Marxism-Leninism as a Philosophical Creed. The Illusion of the Epoch helps readers to understand the roots of Marxism-Leninism and its implications for philosophy, modern political thought, economics, and history. As Professor Tim Fuller has written, this is not, quote, an intemperate book, but rather an effort at a sustained scholarly argument against Marxist views. You're not going to find a lot over at Liberty Fund in praise of Marxism, I'll tell you that much. But I wish they published more about leftist ideas, even if they were from, moderate, conservative, libertarian thinkers. But things like this, I would love to read criticism of the leftist economic traditions, I guess. By the way, also managed to subscribe to Verso Books the first week of this year, so I'm getting it from I'm getting my good dose of left and good dose of right economically. Always like to read antagonistically. This is The Spur of Fame. Again, well, here on the cover we just have the title, and on the spine it says Dialogues of John Adams and Benjamin Rush, 1805 to 1813, edited by John A. Schutz and Douglas Adair. The Spur of Fame is a book about John Adams and Benjamin Rush, who were two remarkably different men who shared a devotion to liberty. Their dialogues on the implications of fame for their generation prove remarkably timely, even for the 21st century. Adams and Rush championed very different views on the nature of the American Constitution and of the republic established within the United States Constitution. Had championed very different views on the nature of the American Revolution and of the republic established within the United States Constitution, yet they shared one of the most important correspondences of their time. One of the things I don't really like about Liberty Fund's blurbs is that sometimes they are absolutely excellent sort of summaries of what the book is all about, and sometimes they're very elliptical and vague and not very helpful at all. And this is one of those times. And other times, like the next book I'll show you, it is literally one sentence, which tells you maybe this much about what the book is about. But, and that next book is The 18th Century Commonwealthman. The 18th Century Commonwealthman by Carolyn Robbins. I would just read you what's on the back instead, but I fear that's probably a bit too much to read for every book. And by the way, as I've showed you, not every single book has back matter to actually read. In this volume, Carolyn Robbins adeptly presents a history of the Commonwealthman, which is a word, and it is one word, by the way, Commonwealthmen, defined as, quote, a gifted and active minority of the population of the British Isles who kept alive during an age of extraordinary complacency and legislative activity a demand for increased liberty of conscience, end quote. That's the blurb for the book. That's all there is. So I guess I looked up some of the names involved, and because it was from I didn't really recognize any of the names people she's talking about, but I guess maybe Sean Standfast could correct me here. Maybe a 17th century Commonwealthman might have been someone like John Milton, possibly. Works like the Areopaginica and other things like that are definitely about the expression of a free conscience and the liberty of conscience. All right, next up. This is a book I was very, very happy to find. It is by the daughter of another writer that was just recently published last year by Liberty Fund. This author's father was the state treasurer under Louis XVI, right as the French Revolution was happening. And his name was Jacques Necker, and I have a book that he wrote on executive power of the great states, which I have read, but is in that interstitial stage of having been read but not reviewed on my channel yet. So it might take a while, but you'll eventually be hearing about that if you want to. This is his daughter, who undoubtedly is much more famous than he is. This is Madame de Staël. Yikes, the glare again. Considerations on the principal events of the French Revolution. by Germain de Stael. A quite large consideration, as you can tell. Germain de Stael's voice, which Napoleon Bonaparte tried to silence by censorship and banishment, is a unique and important contribution to revolutionary historiography. Considerations on the principal events of the French Revolution, considered Madame de Stael's magnum opus, became a classic of liberal thinking, making a deeply original contribution to an ongoing political and historical debate in the early 19th century France and Europe. So, fascinated to know what she'll say about the French Revolution as compared to, say, Thomas Carlyle or Edmund Burke. Next, speaking of John Milton, there was a reason why he popped into my head, and it's because I actually bought a book of John Milton essays. These are, this is not the poetry, this is some of the prose. This is called Areopaginica and Other Political Writings of John Milton. The spine right there. John Milton published several revolutionary manifestos, 2 works defending regicide. He would, wouldn't he? And of course the famous Areopagitica, or Defense of Freedom of Expression and Against Press Censorship. John Alvis, who I think writes the introduction to this book, or has collected the essays at least, has collected into a superb 1-volume edition all of Milton's political writings of enduring importance. Okay, so next up are a couple of 2-volume works. The first one is, so there you go, there's your 2 books. This one is The Origin of the American Revolution, 1759 to 1766, by Bernard Nollenberg. And I don't think you can really read the side, so I'll just read you the title. It's the Growth of the American Revolution, 1766 to 1775. So together they take you from 1759 to 1755. Never heard of Bernard Nollenberg. Tried looking up his name on Google, and the only thing I think I found was the fact that he wrote this book. I don't think he taught anywhere. I don't think he was an academic. I don't think he wrote anything else, which is very peculiar. Maybe I'm mistaken about that. Maybe I did find something, but Liberty Fund has this interesting feature on their site where you can actually look at the table of contents and see what you're going to be reading about before you take the plunge and actually buy it. And I looked at the table of contents and saw whole bunches of things that I wasn't familiar with. So I wanted to add this to my American History Library. In his 2 volumes on the Revolution, Bernard Nollenberg provides a basic narrative of events with extensive citations to the sources and a thorough discussion of the historiography. He concentrates on the political and constitutional clash between Parliament and the colonies that led to the Revolution. Social, economic, and intellectual history enter the story where needed, but Nollenberg was essentially a political historian. Although steeped in the sources and scrupulous about the facts, he wrote Whig history. He sympathizes with the Americans. Lay with the Americans? Maybe when I copied and pasted, maybe it's their fault. He believed that the British ministries were responsible for the crumbling of the empire, and that the Americans represented the cause of liberty. So, sounds like a pro-revolutionary history. Again, Nolenberg published these, I think, in the 60s. One volume in the 60s, maybe the early 70s on the other one. This is something I was especially fascinated to see there. Always had a sort of a standing interest in books on the history of the development of jurisprudence and the history of law. And I found this, Pollock and Maitland's The History of English Law Before the Time of Edward I. Again, 2 volumes, two rather thick volumes. We're looking at, 800 pages apiece here. But Pollock and Maitland, Volume 1 and Volume 2. These were originally published in 1895, so another text that Liberty Fund is sort of bringing back. Sir Frederick Polland and Frederick William Maitland's legal classic, The History of English Law Before the Time of Edward I, expanded the work of Sir Edward Coke, spelled C-O-K-E, pronounced Cook, one of the greatest jurists of the 17th century in England, and William Blackstone, by exploring the origins of key aspects of English common law and society, and with them the development of individual rights as these were gradually carved out from the authority of the Crown and the Church. Although it's been more than a century since its initial publication, Pollock and Maitland's work is still considered an accessible and useful foundational reference for scholars of medieval English law. The History of English Law Before the Time of Edward I helps readers explore the origins of English legal exceptionalism, and through the English tradition, the basis of the law of America, Canada, Australia, and other nations. This work is of interest to legal scholars, historians of the Middle Ages, political scientists, political philosophers, and all those interested in Anglo-Saxon law and early law in society. And I'm interested in every single one of those topics. So wonderful to see something like this reprinted for even at Liberty Fund's asking price is a reasonable price. And of course, as I mentioned in the last video, I got all of these for 80% off. So that was nice. Okay, one more. The last book. This is over at Liberty Fund. They have maybe 8 or 10 volumes of John Mill. They have, I want to say, everything that Mill ever published. And maybe some things he didn't, to be quite honest. But this is the works of John Stuart Mill, and in print so small you can't see there, it says Essays on Ethics, Religion, and Society. So they have it broken up. They have a volume on his economic writings, a volume on his defenses of utilitarianism, another volume on political economy, etc., etc. They have a volume on his work on logic, and of course they have his autobiography and stuff too. This is Essays on Ethics, Religion, and Society. Liberty Fund is pleased to make available the paperback. So this is apparently 8 in the original 33 cloth volumes. I don't think there are 33 volumes in the new edition that they're doing. It's more like 8, 10, 12, something like that. Anyway, of the original collected works of John Stuart Mill that were originally published by the University of Toronto Press that remain most relevant to liberty and responsibility in the 21st century. Mill was born in London in 1806 and educated at the knee of his father, the Scottish philosopher James Mill. John Stuart Mill became one of the 19th century's most influential writers on economics and social philosophy. Essays in Ethics, Religion, and Society includes Mill's response to Benthamite utilitarianism and his development of his own independent moral position. So, of all of the books of essays, this looked like the one on the set of topics I might be most interested in. So, so I bought that one. Might expand out from that. I would really love to read his autobiography. Mill was a fascinating guy, a 19th century liberal, and not just economically, was, very outspoken about the liberation of women being allowed to vote, and for a man in the 19th century, that was saying something. So yeah, that's my last book. I have, let's see, where did they go? They're somewhere around here. A tiny order from literally 2 books from Hamilton Books. And last month, NYRB had a sale, and I think I bought 7 or 8 of their books. So I'll show those sometime within the next few weeks. And then, a couple of weeks ago, Peg, who else, told me about a sale at Princeton University Press. 75% off. Not everything on their site, but let's just say enough books to make it interesting. Something like 1,500 books on pretty much any topic under the sun. Lots of history, sociology, intellectual history, history of the sciences, religion, philosophy, art. All the stuff I love. Those, oh goodness, I think I bought nearly 30 books from Princeton. So those will be coming depending on how the United States Postal Service chooses to operate. I could get those this week, or maybe I'll get them next month. So we'll see how that goes. But for now, I hope you enjoyed the books, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below, and I will see you soon.